In today's video, we have the latest NHL trade talk from around the league. Today, we're focusing on teams like the Philadelphia Flyers, Calgary Flames, Montreal Canadiens, Vancouver Canucks, Washington Capitals, and more. Plus, two longtime NHL players have finally announced their retirements. These players have been under the league for some time. We have a big update on Connor McDavid as well, and another suspension involving Connor Clifton. We'll discuss all that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of news and some trade rumors to take a look at here today. But first up, I want to talk about a couple of players who announced their retirements today. I'm not sure why today was a chosen day. Both of these guys have been out of the league for some time. But hey, haven't been officially retired until now. But longtime Canadiens player Thomas Plekanec has announced his retirement. Of course, he hasn't played in the league in 4 or 5 years, but he has been playing over in the Czech Republic. Played the last few years with Kladno. Obviously get over 1,000 games played, all but a handful with Montreal. Did have a brief stint with the Maple Leafs after getting treated at the deadline. The following year, he went back to Montreal just to get a few games and hit that 1,000-game milestone. But Plekanec was one of the better two-way players during his era of playing, and certainly finally now, after all this time, announces his retirement. I don't think anybody was expecting him to make a comeback because it's been quite some time since he's been out of the NHL. And Jumbo Joe Thornton has announced his retirement, and of course he's done it in typical Joe fashion. We know Jumbo Joe Thornton has always been a pretty bold guy, not afraid to speak his mind, and he released a video on Sharks' social media, tarps off, completely shirtless, and just talking to the camera, just, pretty laid back like he always is, announcing his retirement. So, of course, again, we kind of suspected this. He's been out of the league for a couple of years. Last made an appearance with the Florida Panthers, but Jumbo Joe appeared in over 1,700 games, has over 1,500 points, one of, if not possibly even the greatest passer of his generation. For that era of time that he played, I believe it was 24 different seasons in total that he was in the NHL, like a long-time legend, not only for the beard and for the personality, which is also legendary in its own right, but look at the numbers this guy's put up. I mean, he was the first overall pick. Hard to imagine the Bruins traded him. Went on to many, many, many years of great success with the Sharks. Of course, at the end of things, did make some appearances for a few other teams before calling her quits. Had a stint with the Leafs and the Panthers. But Joe was one of the great players of his generation, an absolute beauty, and I want to wish them the best in retirement. Looks like he's already certainly relishing retirement, as he appeared to be in the video. So if you haven't seen that, check out Shark's social media. I've also shared it on my Twitter, or I guess X account, so you can also view it there. Just a quick plug too for social media. If you want to be able to interact more with me and get more of another, like, not just in the videos and leave comments. It's hard to read all the comments because there's so many in a run of a day and week on this channel. But if you would like to be able to interact more, and I certainly recommend coming on the X platform, formerly known as Twitter. I'm very, very active on there. I post a lot, and just might allow you to be, maybe see a little bit more of me and see a different side of me and interact more. So if that's something you're interested in, certainly go check it out. You'll see at the beginning of every video, I always promote the account handle there on the screen, and then at the same time, it's also linked in the description box down below as well. We have another suspension in the NHL, and that's Sabres defenseman Connor Clifton. He's been suspended 2 games for an illegal check to the head that happened against the Devils the other night. Obviously, Nico Hischier, captain of the Devils, has been injured and will not play. He's going to miss the next at least 1 game for sure. Obviously, when you get a check to the head, normally results in a concussion, and those are hard to predict as far as timelines on returning, but it definitely was justified. Definitely in case of player safety, I think getting this one right. Clifton obviously doesn't have a long history or anything of that nature, but this is still a dirty hit, illegal check to the head, and fully justified in the 2-game ban. Hopefully Hischier's not out too long for the Devils, who are off to a great start to the season. The Ottawa Senators today placed Thomas Chabot on long-term injury reserve. We talked yesterday about the Chabot injury and how this is likely going to lead to an LTIR replacement so they can recall some other players. With the 20-man roster. They were so tight against the cap that they had to play short earlier in the year before they could get an emergency recall. They had no choice but to put Zach McEwen on waivers to go to the minors so they could bring up a defenseman. At least now, during the next 6 weeks, or what's the estimated time frame for Chabot, it could be 4 to 6, but probably closer to 6 on this one. They'll have the LTIR usage so they can bring up players up and down a little bit more freely and see what they can do, because now they're without 3 regular defensemen, which is going to be a challenge. But Artem Zub should be returning hopefully on their next game after playing Pittsburgh tonight. Right now it's 2-0 Sens in the first intermission. After this game this evening, they have 4 days off, and then they're back at home for a few games. So I think the team right now sounds hopeful that Zub will be able to play in the next home game. So in that case, then you can have only 2 regular defensemen out, which is not as bad. We know Chabot's out 6 weeks. We don't know about Erik Brandstrom, who suffered a concussion in that big collision with Cal Clutterbuck on Long Island the other night. Unfortunately, had to be taken off by stretcher. So it's hard to say what kind of timeline he's looking at. We don't know. But with the LTIR replacement, the Senators have recalled today defenseman Tyler Clevin and Nicholas Matinpalo. Matinpalo was a UFA from Europe that came over, who looked pretty good in training camp in the preseason. So, and he's right-handed, which will help them quite a bit, because with Zub out, the only righty they've had is Travis Hamonic, and I think you've had to. The Zub injury alone has caused them to have to rejig all their pairs on D, and then they have a lot of lefties. It just hasn't been working great. I think this will help balance things out here a little bit. Now they have Matinpalo up. Bernard Docker was already recalled, so at least they have 3 lefties and 3 righties for right now, which will, I think, in some ways at least make the defense a little bit better. But we're still seeing a few too many situations where there's players open in the prime areas in the slot and stuff tonight. So still an area of focus for the Sens. Sabres goalie Eric Comrie had an MRI to look after a lower body injury, and it looks like he's going to be out for upwards of a couple of week. They're calling it week to week, but it's hard to say. But 1 week for sure. It could lead to 2 or 3. Just depends on the recovery process. Devin Levi is still considered day-to-day with an injury that he's nursing as well. So right now they've recalled Devin Cooley. So the Sabres had 3 goalies, and obviously now they're 2 of them are hurt. So it goes to show you that having good depth is a blessing sometimes. Connor McDavid still possible, not ruled out for the Heritage Classic tomorrow. The Oilers had an evening practice tonight, like a late day practice with the Heritage Classic setup outside with the arena that they're obviously going to be playing on tomorrow, and he was taking part in all the drills. I did see a few clips. He didn't look too bad, so it's hard to say for sure that he plays, but right now I think the odds are more favorable that he does than he doesn't. Of course, I think a lot of people were hoping this game would be bigger stakes and have more meaning, because obviously both teams have had a really horrendous start to the season, and both teams are looking to use this as a way to catapult themselves out of the negative funk they're in and into a better stretch of better hockey and getting some wins and some points, because it's much needed if they're going to have a chance to be playoff teams this year. So we'll see. Having McDavid in the lineup obviously makes the team so much better. So Oilers are hopeful that he'll be able to play. On to some other parts of the video today. We have a variety of rumors to take a look at. One involved Calgary. There's been some word, because we had word before that the Flames and Noah Hannafin, the defenseman who is, obviously very important to them, plays top pair minutes. We're getting really close on a contract extension. Now there's some word from NHL insiders that they may have hit a snag, and the snag being not so much the terms of the contract, but whether or not Hannafin still wants to commit. Because early in the season, I think a lot of these guys that were kind of showing signs of, okay, I'll consider staying, even though in the offseason I kind of made it known that I probably wouldn't want to, because the environment was way better. Of course, post Daryl Sutter, they, and a new coach was able to bring in, a new attitude, new culture. They made a few lineup changes, and for the most part, the players were feeling a lot better about staying in Calgary early on. But it's not just that. Part of it, as well as looking towards the future and being comfortable and confident that this is a team that they can have a chance to win with when you're committing that long. And the Flames also don't want to be in a predicament, if they don't think they can really contend with this group, to have too many core guys locked up long term, because then it makes it awfully hard to rebuild or retool or do anything to make a lot of changes, because then you're stuck with the same group if you're not confident that group can succeed. So it just sounds like on the hand of an extension. I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but I do think at this point that a trade is still likely. It's not something that we can say for sure is off the table, because it sounds like the snag might be just the slow start to the season, kind of giving some of these guys second thoughts, and if they do want to extend there is reportedly some talks, but it's been pretty quiet on Elias Lindholm, Chris Tanev. We've talked before a couple times about Vancouver media trying to see if the Canucks will be interested in bringing Tanev back. It's just hard to say. Like, you can't imagine these guys agreeing to long-term deals when the team's not winning, because that was part of it. I mean, last year wasn't a great year for the Flames, and yes, it was a negative culture that was kind of being harvested by Daryl Sutter, but at the same time, like, they want to be able to win, and the team is not succeeding. So I would not rule out some Flames trading some core pieces that are unsigned, like Lindholm, Hanifin, Tanev. Until it's done, it's not done. Trades are still possibilities. The Panthers got an update, and it's positive on Aaron Ekblad and Brandon Montour. They're both expected to be joining practice here shortly, and are now targeting a return of around U.S. Thanksgiving. There was talk that I think it was Montour was aiming to be back around that time, but they said Ekblad could be longer and could be like another month beyond that, closer to Christmas or maybe the early part of January. But it seems like he was progressing quite well, and now they're targeting a potential return for both of them around that time. So that's good. There is some talk, though, that they, in the interim, still might make a move on defense. Apparently, the Florida Panthers are one of the teams that have shown a lot of interest in the Jackets, the defensemen that have been available, because there's a few that the Jackets are willing to move, including Andrew Peeke and Adam Boqvist. There's some word that Eric Gabranson would be available too, although I don't think a lot of teams are going to like that Eric Gabranson contract. Peeke or Boqvist, a lot more likely. You don't have the smaller money, less term, just not so much to swallow. So to me, it makes sense if Florida could find a piece, because I'm honestly not that confident in the Florida blue line when it's at full strength. I think it could still use some more help. So to bring in a guy like that's not a terrible idea. Obviously, if they get too far behind, the 8 ball here out of the gate to start the season, it's awfully tough to climb your way back in. And even if those guys are able to return, around Thanksgiving, that's still fairly late in November. That's still another month from now. It's another, good amount of games. And we know by U.S. Thanksgiving, if you're out of the playoffs or even out by a couple of points, getting back in is almost impossible. Not impossible, but the odds are greatly against you. So they certainly don't want to let it get to that point. So don't be surprised if you see Florida add some reinforcements on the back end. Apparently, according to Elliot Friedman, teams have been calling the Flyers on Morgan Frost. He has been a healthy scratch. He's been mentioned in our rumor videos a few times before, but now it's really picking up interest because Tortorella and the Flyers continue to scratch him. I think it's been 5 games that he hasn't played, that he's been out as a healthy scratch. Plus, the Tortorella made comments himself saying it's not so much that he's been bad, just that a lot of these other guys have been better than him, and the team's been doing well. It just doesn't sound like Tortorella really sees him as being part of the team's future. And there was word that the Flyers were dangled him as trade bait in the offseason a lot too. I think largely because I'm not convinced that Tortorella really sees him as being a guy that he really thinks will help move this team forward, or that they can do better without him. So, Frost is a player who hasn't hit his full potential, but certainly had a breakthrough campaign last year. And I know when there was rumors about the Flyers and the Sens having a lot of talks around trades regarding Matthew Joseph, which that stuff's all kind of put on hold right now, that he was one of the guys that could have maybe gone back to Ottawa. So, at this point, I don't think the Ottawa Senators are in the mix anymore, but other teams have been inquiring. They're getting a lot of interest, so we'll see if they pull off a trade. It's expected in Ottawa because of the Pinto situation now that I still, like I mentioned yesterday or the day before, I still see the Sens making a trade. in the not too distant future, but they have more time now. They don't have to rush things because they're not trying to get Pinto signed. But I can still see a guy like Kubalik or somebody getting moved to give them some more cap flexibility sometime here in the next little while, like whether it be, in a few weeks or maybe in December. It's hard to say exactly, but not too distant future. And also in the latest 32 Thoughts podcast, Elliot Friedman also talked about a handful of players that he felt teams were shopping or that they were looking themselves and talking to the teams about wanting a fresh start and wanting trade. Some of these guys we've talked about before, but we know the Habs and Muriel Armia is somebody that they're trying to move. He's been called up but hadn't played yet, so he needs to get in the lineup to see if they can be showcased as a player who can be helpful somewhere else. There was a link between him and Anthony Mantha in Washington, and they're both players that are still very much in play, but they sounds like they need a third team to make that deal. If Montreal is going to take Mantha, then they need Armia to go. If Washington's going to take a player, they need Mantha to go, but at this point, I'm not convinced that Armia would go to Washington per se. It sounds like he would go somewhere else. They're looking for a third team to take Armia so that Montreal could take Mantha. Is kind of what the rumor was, but we'll see if that continues to materialize or not. Connor Garland in Vancouver has his agent helping out as well, still trying to get him a trade to get a fresh start for himself as well as the team. And Kevin LeBanc in San Jose is another guy too. The Sharks are off to a historically bad season, so you're going to see lots of Sharks players popping up in the rumor mill. I think they'll probably attempt clearing house a bit here, definitely near the deadline for sure, because that's a team going nowhere fast, and they need a lot more talent, and some of their young guys are having a lot of potential, but it's going to take a while before they're going to be impacting things much on the NHL level. So that is all your news and notes for tonight. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.